for in today's CFO, brought to you by the Controllers Council. My name is Neil Brown, Executive Director of the Controllers Council, and before we get started, just a few brief housekeeping items. After our presentation, we'll have some audience Q&A, so attendees, please use the GoToWebinar control panel to submit your questions, and we'll get to as many as possible. Now, in answer to a frequent question, you'll receive a link to this webcast via email in the next 24 hours, so no need for notes or screenshots. With that, I'd like to introduce our sponsor. Oracle NetSuite is a cloud-based business management platform used by more than 34,000 organizations across the globe. NetSuite seamlessly integrates financial planning, accounts receivable, accounts payable, revenue recognition, tax management, and other core accounting functions with real-time financial visibility to improve financial performance. To learn more, visit netsuite.com and request a free product tour. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our subject matter expert and presenter, Tom Kelly. Before joining Oracle NetSuite, Tom founded T. Edward, a strategic and operational cloud consultancy, providing cloud expertise and CXO advisory. Prior to T. Edward, Tom held a variety of executive positions with large cap companies, including PepsiCo, eFunds, and Deluxe, as well as small cap privately held entities such as FullContact and PeopleNet Communications. Tom is a CPA and he holds a BA degree in accounting from North Carolina State University and an MBA in finance from Fordham University. Tom, welcome and take it away.
Well, thank you, Neil. I appreciate it. So as we get into this here today, let's move to the next slide. And so what I usually like to talk about is how there's a couple things going on in the accounting/finance profession these days. It's almost like you have two full-time jobs. The first one, as I think we all know, right? We have to quote unquote count the beans. So your control environment, making sure things are secure and making sure you're protecting and safeguarding the assets of the company. Next. But I think what's happening more and more these days is organizations, they don't just want you to count the beans, they want you to help grow them too. And so, frankly speaking, I think the first job you have is almost a thankless job. It's one of those jobs that nobody really cares about it unless something goes wrong. Then everybody cares about it, right? So, but the reality is this other component, growing the beans, there's a lot that goes into that. And it's probably more and more in demand these days when organizations are looking to CFOs and looking at the skill sets that they're going to bring to the organization. The first one is almost a given. You know, you're expected to do it. I feel the appreciation is probably not really there in terms of what it really takes to make sure you can accomplish that aspect. And then this other one is probably much more visible in some regards in that they really want you to help make an impact on the company, whether it's, you know, driving sales or strategy and direction of the organization and a whole host of other things that I'll get into here today. Next. And so maybe looking at another way, counting and growing the beans, I have the Vitruvian CFO. So, you know, our friend Leonardo da Vinci, the Vitruvian man, the Renaissance man. If you look at some of these things that are popping up here, you know, some of them we see and we understand, you know, accounting, yeah, we get that. But some of the other things, maybe not, where it goes into CIO activities, not necessarily the chief technology officer aspect of a company, but CIO in terms of, you know, everything from the email your company is using to the firewall. Being part of healthcare benefits, securing them, delivering them, having responsibility for HR, you know, going even beyond that to be even tech savvy, dare I say. So there are a lot of things that I think are really in demand today, what organizations expect you to be able to do. I think a little bit of the good news is, and, you know, I'm sure you never expected to hear from a person who's working for Oracle NetSuite, but, you know, technology can be a real help. And it's made, you know, significant strides, I would say, in the last 10, 20 years, which we can agree to. Next slide. And so I like to start out with this little joke, and some of you may have heard it, but if you'll indulge me here, there's a man, he's in a balloon at a fair, and this brisk wind picks up and it blows him way off course, way off into the countryside. And he finds himself above this cornfield. And as he's up, up there above the cornfield, he looks down this road and he can see a man walking towards him. So he lowers the balloon down about 30 feet and he calls out to the man. He says, "Excuse me, sir, can you tell me where I am?" And the man on the ground looks up at the balloon and looks down at the cornfield and says, "Why, yes, you're in a balloon about 30 feet above this cornfield." And the balloonist just starts shaking his head and responds back. He says, "You, sir, must be an accountant." The man on the ground says, "Why, yes, I am. How do you know that?" And the balloonist says, "Well, what you've told me is absolutely correct, but it's of no use to anyone." And so that's where the joke used to end, but my cynical side added this piece. The accountant calls up to the man in the balloon and says, "Excuse me, sir, you must be a manager." And the balloonist says, "Why, yes, I am. How do you know that?" He said, "Well, you don't know where you are. You don't know where you're going. You're in the same spot you were before we met, yet you expect my immediate help. But now somehow it's my fault." And so I use this joke as a way that hopefully it rings true for many of you, right? It goes to the point of, I think accountants technically can get a bad rap, perhaps for what they do, but the reality of what's going on here, folks, is we as accountants or accountants and finance professionals, we know the language of business, and who better than us to be able to interpret that for the rest of the organization? And when I say interpret that, I'm not talking about telling somebody, sales are up. Why is that? Well, the answer is because we sold more. No, we want more granularity. We really want to know what's driving sales. Is it price? Is it mix? Is it volume? Whatever it might be, to have insightful information, to be able to leverage that skill set that we have, understanding the language of business, but being able to deliver that to the people so that they can understand, what's happening, why it's happening, and probably most importantly, so they can actually do something about it. Next slide. And so if it's not enough for me, and who am I to tell you, we CFOs need to do this, but this is the CPA exam. And there's already been one change on it where they're expecting you to be more adept at data analytics, being able to infer information. So the example we just gave, selling more because our revenue is up because we sold more isn't going to cut it anymore. But then even taking it a step further, the CPA exam is testing you to make sure that you're going to be proficient in having IT acumen, understanding the IT landscape. What are the right types of applications and products you should be buying to help your company and to help run your company. So if you don't want to believe me, for those of you out there who are CPAs, just know that now this is going to be a requirement on the CPA exam, and you have to pass it. Next slide. And so another thing that's happening is we look at the hiring trends. Since the beginning of the pandemic, what seems to be occurring is organizations are now starting to look within. Where in the past it was probably more, we're going to look outside the organization for CEOs, CFOs. That's changed pretty dramatically since the pandemic. And I would argue it's a good thing. I think the more you can build, your workforce from within, the more continuity you end up with. I think the better leadership in some degree, depending upon how you're growing these individuals. So suffice to say, the focus is turning within, and it's turning within both for the CEO and CFO category, and also COO, which is not part of this graph, but that also holds true in this. This is a Chris and Calder Associates survey back in 2022. Next slide. And the other thing is the promotion from CFO to CEO is also trending upward. So they're looking within, and they're also looking to take the CFOs and promote them into the chief executive role. And as you can see from some of the commentary I've made so far, what we're really talking about is a very well-rounded individual, not somebody who's got the green eye shade and is, the unpolitical term, I guess I would say, of bean counter, but somebody who really understands and is astutely aware of what's happening with the business, not only today, but can also have a very good handle on predicting the future for the business. One thing that also is not part of this slide that is also holding true, guess what position is probably the most current one, or the most one that where you have a COO, who fills that role? Well, believe it or not, it's the CFO. So the CFO is having an upward trend in both the chief operating officer situation, where companies have that, and also, as this graph is depicting here from the Chris Calder Associates, as well as getting into the CEO position. Next slide. And here's another thing that that came out. This was from Deloitte for Fortune survey, and what it said is that the one position that is the probably most important to the success of the CEO role is the CFO. So you can see it's 66% there. So that's a significant number, and it kind of just bodes and I think works well when we're looking at situations